Have you ever been in a conversation before and suddenly someone cuts you off? That's precisely how some people use the verse we're gonna talk about today. So sometimes I go online and I see some comments of women and they have strong theological foundations, and yet sometimes they are shut down, or at least some people are trying to shut them down with this verse. What is it? Here we go. Mabuhay and welcome to Blooming Kate. And in this very short Bible study, we're going to talk about 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 12. It reads, I do not permit a woman to teach or have authority over a man. She must be silent. As always, remember that the Bible is an ancient text. There are conversations and practices very much tied to the culture and concerns of the Christians at that time. So in 1 Timothy, an aging Paul sent his letters to Timothy to mentor him and encourage him to continue his ministry work. Timothy was working in the church of Ephesus, and this was a place plagued by false teachers. The letter was written likely around 62 to 66 AD. Paul was counseling Timothy on matters of church leadership, practices, worship, qualifications for leaders, and addressing the concerns in how to fight against the false teachers. The letter was intended for Timothy to have encouragement to live the standard of a Christian life by living a life beyond reproach. We only have Paul's side of the letter answering the concerns of the church. We don't have the exact letter that was sent to him that he's now answering in this letter. So we have to read between the lines and infer from the way he answers what could have been the concerns raised to him. There are two reasons why I think Paul was not trying to silence the women of the church in general, and why I think he's not trying to take away ministry from them. Number one, Paul was trying to address their battle against the false teachers. So you would see at the end of chapter 1 that he was trying to tell Timothy to stand up against false teachers, stand up in his faith, because some people have made a shipwreck out of their faith by following the false teachers. I actually learned a lot in understanding this letter from a Bible Project podcast episode called Pen, Parchment, and People, Letters episode 8. I think so. If you have time and you want to really dig deeper, I invite you to listen in on that one. Anyway, in that time, teachers like Paul were supported by ministry partners. Paul actually had some women patrons and supporters and even apostles at this time. Even Jesus, in his time, also had women supporters and disciples like Joanna, Susanna, and Mary Magdalene. So on the other side of the coin, even false teachers had their supporters and patrons too. They get monetary support from these patrons so that the patrons can hear what they want to hear, or so the teachers can say what these patrons want to hear. Some of these patrons are women too. There are some women who are trying to peddle false teachings and usurp powers. This is the reason why Paul was talking about silence and silencing these people, including the women. The second reason I believe that Paul is not trying to silence Christian women in the ministry is because there are anecdotes of women in ministry. In Paul's second letter to Timothy, he honored the women in Timothy's life. I am reminded of your sincere faith, a faith that dwelt first in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and now I am sure dwells in you as well. So in this time of this writing, remember, we are in 60 plus AD. It's more than 60 years from the time when Jesus resurrected. There are people who grew up already knowing the gospel. And Timothy is one of them too. And because of this, Paul is commending them for this work in family ministry. This also shows us that women in that time were also active in sharing the gospel and in ministry even in their family life. The lives of these women aren't individualistic too, like how some people live today. They spent most of their time working together with other women, spending time with children, and this is when they share the gospel too. We also have to remember that Ephesus was near the Aegean Sea and it was a place of commerce. It was a metropolis and many women were involved in the commerce too. So they had businesses and people knew each other in their communities. And so this is how they relate with other people, showing kindness, sharing their time, listening to people, and finding their time, their way, so that they can share the gospel. And even when they are in the house church in Ephesus, just like the one of Prisca and Aquila. In Paul's letters, he also mentioned other women who contributed to the ministry of the gospel. So let's read some of them in Romans 16. I commend to you our sister Phoebe, a servant of the church at Cenchrea, that you may welcome her in the Lord in a way worthy of the saints and help her in whatever she may need from you. For she has been a patron of many and myself as well. Greet Prisca and Aquila, my fellow workers in Christ, who risked their necks for my life, to whom I not only give thanks, but all the churches of the Gentiles give thanks as well. Greet also the church in this house. Greet my beloved Epaenetus, who was the first convert to Christ in Asia. Greet Mary, who has worked hard for you. Greet Andronicus and Junia, my kinsmen and my fellow prisoners. They are well known to the apostles, and they were in Christ before me. Paul's letter to Timothy was apostolic in nature, and we don't have the bigger picture or more stories detailing what these women did. But his gratitude in his letter and the titles used to describe the women like apostle, disciple, deacon, servant, and leaders. So we understand from these names and these titles that there were women who actively worked for the gospel and the ministry. Because of this information, like the 2 points I shared with you today, I firmly believe that there is space for women to preach the gospel. However, just as not all men are made for the pulpit, we also as women must pray for where and to whom we should share the gospel, whether in our home, in our work, or our circle of influence. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope that this little Bible study helped you in understanding Paul's message better. It would help me so much if you could like this video and subscribe to this channel. Thank you so much. Have a great day!